I am Arthur, 28 years old. For 20 long years, I was the invisible child in my own home, constantly pushed aside and emotionally starved so my parents could worship my younger brother, Julian. But the real nightmare started last month when my father demanded I attend Julian's lavish wedding, threatening to completely cut off my supposed community college tuition if I did not obey his strict orders. While I was sitting in my corner executive office in downtown Chicago, minding my own business and reviewing the metrics for my latest promotion, my father sent a massive family group text. He told 30 of our closest relatives that I was a selfish, bitter, broke failure who would be completely cut out of the family inheritance if I ruined Julian's special day. They humiliated me publicly, laughing at my supposed poverty. But there is one massive thing they did not know. I was not a struggling, aging community college student. I secretly graduated top of my class from a prestigious university years ago, and I am currently pulling in a massive six-figure salary as a director of product analytics. And right now, those same arrogant parents are standing on my front porch, completely bankrupt, crying and begging me to save them from total financial ruin. Before I tell you exactly what happened and how I brought their house of cards crashing down, hit that like button if you truly believe in justice and karma. And do not forget to let me know where you are watching from in the comments section below. Now, let us go back to where it all began. The afternoon sun was reflecting blindingly off the tempered glass of my desk. Outside my 15th floor window, the Chicago skyline stood tall and proud against a clear blue sky. I had just finished a brutal 2-hour strategy meeting with the executive board, securing a massive promotion that came with a heavy bump in my salary and stock options. My life was finally exactly where I wanted it to be. It was quiet, it was successful, and most importantly, it was completely separated from the toxic wasteland of my childhood. I liked my peace. I protected my peace with high walls and unlisted phone numbers. But then, my personal cell phone buzzed. The caller ID flashed on the screen, breaking the silence of my office. Richard, my father. I did not answer. I never answered his calls during business hours, mostly because his calls usually consisted of him complaining about his life choices and blaming me for the weather. I let it ring out to voicemail. 10 seconds later, a text message popped up on the screen. Then another one. Then a heavy barrage of them, buzzing aggressively against the wood of my desk like an angry hornet trapped in a jar. I picked up the phone, unlocked the screen, and read the messages. Arthur, you are testing my absolute last nerve. Julian's wedding is in exactly 2 weeks. You have not RSVP'd. This is the most important event of your brother's entire life. Serena has put thousands of hours into planning this. If you do not show up and support him like a good older brother, you can forget about your tuition payments. I will call the bank and cut you off completely today. You will be flipping burgers at a drive-thru instead of finishing your community college degree. Call your mother immediately. She is having heart palpitations over your selfishness. I leaned back in my heavy leather chair and let out a laugh. It was not a happy laugh. It was a dry, hollow sound that echoed in the large office. Tuition payments. My father actually believed, with his entire chest, that he was holding my entire future hostage over a pathetic $300 a month for a community college I never even attended. Let me give you the full context of my family dynamic. When I was 18 years old, I worked 3 jobs and studied until my eyes bled. I got a full-ride academic scholarship to the University of Chicago. It was the absolute proudest moment of my miserable teenage life. I remember running into the kitchen, clutching that thick acceptance envelope, my hands physically shaking with joy. But when I showed the acceptance letter to my parents, my mother, Margaret, did not even put down her glossy magazine. She just frowned, looked at my father, and said it would make Julian feel inferior because Julian was currently failing basic high school algebra for the 2nd time. My father looked at the letter, tossed it into the trash can, and told me, flat out, that I was staying local. I was not allowed to go to Chicago. I was not allowed to outshine the golden boy. The family college fund, which my grandfather had set up for both of us, was going to be drained entirely to pay for private tutors and a luxury car for Julian so he would not feel bad about his grades. So I did what any desperate, cornered teenager would do. I played their game. I forged local community college enrollment papers. I printed out fake class schedules. I packed my bags in the dead of night, took a Greyhound bus to Chicago, and claimed my scholarship. For the past 10 years, I had maintained the grand illusion of being a slow, struggling student who was taking a decade to get a basic 2-year associate's degree. My parents sent me $300 a month for rent and books, which I quietly redirected into a separate, high-yield savings account that remained completely untouched. It was the cheap price I paid for my total freedom. I opened the banking app on my phone. The screen loaded instantly, displaying my primary checking account. The balance sat comfortably at a number that would make my father choke on his cheap morning coffee. My investment portfolio, my real estate holdings, my corporate retirement accounts, none of it existed in their reality. To them, I was just Arthur, the massive disappointment who could not get his life together. My phone buzzed again, vibrating violently. This time it was a voicemail notification from my mother. I pressed play and put it on speakerphone, letting her voice fill the sterile office space. "Arthur, please," her voice whined, carrying that deeply familiar tone of manufactured victimhood she used at her weekly HOA meetings to get her way. "Your brother is so incredibly stressed right now. Serena is planning the absolute perfect wedding, and your father is threatening to have a literal heart attack over your stubbornness. Do not ruin this for Julian. He deserves a perfect day. Just come home for the weekend. We will even pay for your bus ticket if you are that broke. Just show up and fold the napkins or something." A bus ticket. Fold the napkins. I looked down at the custom-tailored Tom Ford suit I was wearing. I looked at the heavy gold watch on my wrist. I looked at the framed diploma on my wall, reading Summa Cum Laude in bold black ink. For years I had stayed far away, protecting my mental health, letting them believe their comfortable, arrogant lies. I never corrected them because I simply did not care enough to engage. But listening to my mother's voice, hearing the absolute entitlement and the deeply ingrained disrespect, something heavy shifted inside my chest. I was incredibly tired of hiding in the shadows of my own success. I was tired of playing the pathetic, broke extra in Julian's grand, delusional movie. I turned my attention back to the dual monitors on my desk. I opened a secure browser window and navigated to the airline portal. I did not look for budget seating. I did not look for standby tickets. I selected the first-class cabin on the earliest flight out of O'Hare. I paid for it using a premium credit card my parents did not even know existed. I closed my laptop, placed it carefully into my leather briefcase, and walked out of the glass-walled office. It was time to go back to the hometown I hated. Not to celebrate Julian, not to fold napkins, but to finally look my toxic family in the eye as the powerful man I had become. I thought it would be a simple weekend of establishing firm boundaries and dropping the heavy truth. I had absolutely no idea I was walking straight into a catastrophic financial massacre. The rental car crunched loudly over the familiar gravel of my childhood driveway. I had intentionally opted for a modest, unremarkable sedan at the airport, not wanting to give away the game too early. I wanted to see exactly how they treated the broke version of me before I dropped the hammer. I parked the car directly behind a blindingly white, spotless Porsche Macan that looked completely out of place in our middle-class neighborhood. The house itself looked like a grenade of expensive white tulle. Imported ivory ribbons and massive floral arrangements had gone off on the front porch. Before I even reached the bottom of the wooden steps, the front door swung open aggressively. My mother stood there. Her hair was dyed that specific, expensive shade of country club blonde, and she was wearing a strained, irritated smile. "Arthur, you finally made it," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. She gave me a stiff, one-armed hug that felt more like a TSA security pat-down than a motherly greeting. She pulled back and immediately looked me up and down, her eyes scanning my clothes. "Well, that jacket is certainly a choice. Did you pick that up at a Walmart clearance rack? Never mind, do not answer that. Go around to the back door. Your father is busy in his study, and Julian and Serena are going over the luxury catering menu in the dining room. Do not track dirt into the house and do not disturb them." I did not say a single word about the fact that the jacket she just insulted cost more than her entire wedding dress. I just offered a tight, emotionless nod and stepped inside the house. The interior smelled intensely of vanilla candles and deep financial anxiety. As I walked down the narrow hallway, the childhood memories hit me like a physical blow to the stomach. The walls were still heavily plastered with Julian's mediocre achievements. His middle school participation trophies were polished and displayed on custom floating shelves. His perfectly average report cards were framed like priceless Renaissance art. There was not a single photograph of me anywhere. I stopped abruptly in front of the empty wall space near the bottom of the staircase. That was exactly where I used to sit and wait. I vividly remembered being 15 years old, holding a massive blue ribbon from the state science fair. I had spent 6 grueling months analyzing local water tables and agricultural runoff, a massive project that eventually won me a statewide academic grant. I had rushed home that afternoon, my heart hammering fiercely against my ribs with pure excitement, waiting to show my parents. I sat on that exact spot on the floor and waited for 3 long hours. When they finally came home, laughing and carrying bags of takeout, they walked right past me. They had gone to Julian's junior varsity soccer game. He had sat on the bench for 80 straight minutes without touching the ball once, but they had bought him a massive, customized ice cream cake to celebrate his incredible team spirit. When I finally stood up and proudly showed my father my blue ribbon, he just sighed heavily, rubbed his temples, and told me to take the kitchen trash out because I was blocking the hallway and making a mess. "Arthur, are you just going to stand there staring at the wall like a creep?" I snapped out of the dark memory. Julian was coming down the stairs, looking like he had just stepped out of a catalog for entitled frat boys. He was wearing a designer polo shirt popped at the collar. Behind him was a woman I had never met before. She was stunning, but in a very manufactured, dangerously expensive way. She wore designer clothes dripping with obvious logos, perfectly manicured nails, and a bright smile that did not quite reach her cold, calculating eyes. "Arthur," Julian smirked, crossing his arms over his chest and looking down at me from the 3rd step. "Glad you could take time off from your rigorous community college schedule. I know those introductory English classes can be really tough. This is Serena, my fiancée." Serena descended the rest of the stairs and extended a hand adorned with a diamond engagement ring that looked aggressively, unnaturally large. "So incredibly nice to finally meet the mysterious older brother. Julian has told me absolutely everything about you. It is so genuinely brave of you to keep trying at school at your age. Most people would have just given up by now." I took her hand. Her grip was weak, dismissive, and clammy. "Nice to meet you too, Serena. I saw the brand new Porsche outside in the driveway. Is that yours?" Julian immediately puffed out his chest like a proud peacock. "Serena is a self-made crypto millionaire, Arthur. She runs a highly exclusive, decentralized blockchain investment fund. She is completely self-made. We are actually closing on a massive 5-bedroom real estate property out in the suburbs right after we get back from the honeymoon in Bora Bora." Decentralized blockchain investment fund. I repeated the phrase in my head, tasting the bitter words. My professional background was heavily rooted in deep data science. I literally built the complex algorithms that detected international financial fraud for a living. I knew a pathetic buzzword salad when I heard one. "Fascinating," I said smoothly, keeping my face completely neutral. "Which specific exchanges do you primarily trade on for liquidity?" Serena's bright smile faltered for a fraction of a second. It was just a micro-expression, a tiny tightening of the muscles around her eyes, but I caught it instantly. "Oh, mostly private offshore platforms. Exclusive access through my high-net-worth network of investors. It is very complex, Arthur. You really would not get it unless you were deep in the financial industry." "Right?" I replied calmly. "Basic math can be really tricky for some people." Before she could respond, my father emerged from his home office, aggressively holding a massive stack of pristine wedding programs. He did not greet me. He did not ask about my flight. He just marched over and shoved the heavy stack directly into my chest. Take these into the dining room and fold them exactly down the middle. Keep your hands clean. And do not bother Serena with your stupid questions, Arthur. She operates on a level of high-stakes business you will never comprehend in your lifetime. I took the programs. The sheer, unadulterated disrespect was staggering, but I swallowed the sharp, venomous reply that was resting on the tip of my tongue. I walked into the dining room to fold the heavy cardstock. Through the swinging kitchen door, I saw Clara, the professional wedding planner my mother had hired to manage the event. She looked completely frazzled, sweating through her blouse and arguing quietly but intensely on her cell phone. Suddenly, Clara bumped hard into the wooden doorframe, dropping a thick white binder. Papers scattered wildly across the hardwood floor. "Let me help you with that," I said, crouching down immediately to gather the documents before they got stepped on. "Thank you. I am just so incredibly stressed right now," Clara muttered, rubbing her temples aggressively. As I picked up a specific page, a bold line of red text caught my trained eye. It was an invoice from the luxury catering company they had hired. At the very bottom of the page, right under the payment history section, it read in bold letters, "Transaction declined. Insufficient funds. Tempt 1. Tempt 2. Tempt 3. The credit card listed on the invoice belonged directly to Serena. I handed the stack of papers back to Clara, keeping my expression perfectly calm. "Looks like there might be a slight issue with the payment processing." Clara sighed heavily, glancing nervously toward the hallway to make sure nobody else was listening. "Serena's black card keeps getting declined everywhere. She says all her liquid assets are temporarily tied up in a secure offshore crypto vault and she is liquidating them tomorrow morning. But my floral vendors are threatening to walk off the job today. I honestly do not know what to do anymore." A self-proclaimed crypto millionaire whose premium card declines for a basic catering invoice? A wealthy woman driving a brand new Porsche Macan, but who cannot cover a simple floral arrangement? The highly analytical part of my brain clicked into high gear. This was not just a pretentious, annoying woman marrying my spoiled brother. This was a walking, talking, breathing red flag. I thought the worst part of this miserable weekend would be dealing with my family's toxic behavior. I was so incredibly wrong. Later that evening, the house grew eerily quiet. The engaged couple had gone out to an exclusive luxury wine tasting event downtown. I was walking quietly down the dark hallway to grab a glass of ice water from the kitchen when I heard hushed, heavily panicked voices coming from my father's study. The heavy oak door was cracked open just a single inch, spilling a thin line of yellow light onto the floorboards. "Richard, I am absolutely terrified." My mother was whispering urgently. Her voice was shaking in a raw way I had never heard before. "The second mortgage paperwork finally came through the bank today, but tapping into my entire corporate 401k and my mother's inheritance money. Are you absolutely sure about this? If this investment goes wrong, we lose this house. We lose everything." I froze in my tracks. The blood completely drained from my face, leaving me cold. A second mortgage? Draining their retirement fund? Using the inheritance? "Stop panicking like a child, Margaret," my father snapped viciously. "Serena guarantees a 25% return in 6 short months. It is a closed-door crypto liquidity pool. We put in $200,000 right now in cash. We pull out $500,000 by Christmas. Julian is marrying into a literal gold mine. We have to show her we are serious, high-level investors. This is exactly how real generational wealth is built." I did not think about the consequences. I just pushed the heavy oak door open and stepped into the light. My parents jumped violently. Pure guilt flashed across both of their faces before my father's expression instantly hardened into pure, unadulterated rage. "Have you been eavesdropping on private conversations? You ungrateful sneak? You took out a second mortgage on your home to give cash to a woman you have known for barely 6 months?" I demanded, stepping further into the room, my voice rising in disbelief. "Dad, are you completely out of your mind? There is no such thing as a guaranteed 25% return in any crypto market. It does not exist. It is a textbook Ponzi scheme structure designed to steal your money." My father's face turned a violent shade of purple. He slammed his fist hard onto his mahogany desk. How dare you speak to me that way? You know absolutely nothing about how the real world operates. You are a 30-year-old failed college student living off my charity. Serena is a financial visionary. You are just incredibly jealous because your brother found a successful, beautiful woman to marry, while you have accomplished absolutely nothing with your pathetic life. Richard, calm down, my mother pleaded nervously, but then she turned her sharp glare directly on me. Arthur, you have always been so deeply bitter. You simply cannot stand to see Julian happy and successful. Serena is part of this family now. How can you be so incredibly cruel and judgmental? Cruel? I am trying to stop you from losing the literal roof over your head, I argued, pointing at the mortgage papers on the desk. Let me look at the investment contracts. Let me see the specific wallet addresses she is using to transfer the funds. If it is a legitimate fund, the blockchain is entirely public. I can verify the liquidity in 10 minutes on my laptop. Get out! My father growled dangerously, pointing a shaking finger at the door. Get out of my home office right now. And if you speak one single word of this to Julian or Serena, I swear to God, Arthur, I will call my lawyer tomorrow and you will never see a single dime of my inheritance. You will be dead to me. I stared at them for a long moment. They were so utterly blinded by their own greed, so desperately eager to believe in the grand illusion of their golden son's perfection, that they were joyfully marching straight toward a financial cliff. I turned on my heel and walked out without another word. I retreated to my cramped childhood bedroom and immediately pulled my high-powered work laptop from my bag. I did not need their permission to dig for the truth. Within an hour, I had bypassed basic search engines and accessed a series of deep public property records, corporate registries, and financial databases. I ran Serena's full name. Nothing. 0 hits. No registered LLCs, no regulated investment funds, no property deeds anywhere in the country. What about the expensive Porsche in the driveway? A simple license plate lookup through a contact I had in the insurance industry confirmed my worst suspicion. It was a short-term luxury rental, leased under a fake corporate account that was currently flagged for non-payment. There was a soft, hesitant knock on my bedroom door. It was Uncle Thomas, my mother's older brother. He was the only person in this entire toxic family who had ever treated me like a normal human being. He walked in, holding 2 cups of black coffee, his face deeply lined with genuine concern. I heard the yelling downstairs, Thomas said quietly, handing me a warm mug. You tried to warn them about the money, didn't you? They gave her everything they have, Uncle Tommy. The house equity, the college fund, the retirement accounts. It is a massive scam. Thomas sighed heavily, sitting down slowly on the edge of my narrow bed. I tried to tell your stubborn father last week. I noticed she skillfully deflected every specific financial question I asked her at dinner. But Richard is a deeply proud, arrogant man. He would much rather lose everything he owns than admit his golden boy made a catastrophic mistake. Thomas leaned over and looked closely at my laptop screen. Rows of complex data, IP tracking logs, and encrypted financial registries were open. He raised an eyebrow in surprise. This does not look like community college homework, Arthur. I looked at him, and for the first time in 10 long years, I told a member of my blood family the absolute truth. It is not homework. I am a data analytics executive, Uncle Tommy. I build systems that track digital fraud for a living. I make more money in a single month than Dad makes in an entire year. Thomas stared at me in stunned silence. Then, a slow, incredibly genuine smile spread across his weathered face. I always knew you were destined for great things, kid. You survived their madness. But what exactly are we going to do about this disaster? I need to trace her real digital identity, I said, my fingers flying rapidly across the keyboard. Just then, my bedroom door swung wide open without a knock. It was Lucas, my older cousin. He was Uncle Thomas's son, a guy who always seemed outwardly friendly but had a desperate, reckless hunger for quick cash. Hey man, Lucas said smoothly, looking carefully between me and his dad. I heard you guys talking in the hallway. Arthur, do you really think Serena is a fraud? Honestly, I have had my dark doubts too. She promised to get me in on the ground floor of her new token launch next week if I gave her 10 grand in cash. Should I pull out? Show me what you have found so far. I hesitated for a second, but Lucas played the concerned family member role perfectly. I turned the laptop screen slightly, showing him the rental agreement for the Porsche and the completely empty corporate registries. She does not exist on paper anywhere, Lucas. Whatever money you gave her, demand it back right now or call the police. Lucas looked genuinely shocked, his eyes widening. Wow. Okay. Good looking out, man. I am going to go call my bank immediately to stop the transfer. He turned and hurried out of the room. I went back to work, diving deeper into the web. By 2 a.m., using advanced facial recognition software scanning across obscure scam survivor message boards, I finally found a direct hit. Serena was not Serena. Her real legal name was Elena Vance, and she had a very long, highly documented history of doing this exact thing on multiple forums. I felt a massive surge of triumph. I had the hard proof, but suddenly, my phone buzzed on the desk. It was an anonymous burner number, but the text message chilled my blood instantly. Stop digging into my past, Arthur. You are ruining your family's happiness. Lucas showed me everything you have. Mind your own business and go back to school, or I will convince your father you are trying to extort me for cash and have you arrested. Lucas, my own cousin. He had not gone to call his bank to cancel a transfer. He had gone straight to Serena to warn her, probably trying to leverage my information to secure his own fake payout. The betrayal stung sharply, a brutal reminder that in this family, loyalty was always for sale to the highest bidder. Serena knew I was onto her game. The storm was officially here, and it was going to destroy everything in its path. The next morning, the atmosphere inside the house was utterly suffocating. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Serena was already awake, playing the role of the perfect, wounded victim to absolute perfection. When I walked into the kitchen to pour a cup of coffee, she flinched dramatically, dropped her spoon, and pressed herself deep into Julian's chest, pretending to tremble. My father glared at me from across the kitchen island as if I were a convicted criminal who had just broken in. Lucas sat quietly at the end of the table, cowardly refusing to make eye contact with me, quietly sipping his orange juice as if he hadn't sold me out hours ago. I just honestly do not know why Arthur hates me so much, Serena whispered loudly, squeezing out a single, highly calculated tear that rolled down her perfectly powdered cheek. I have tried so incredibly hard to welcome him into our lives. Do not worry about him, baby, Julian said aggressively, kissing her forehead tenderly. He shot me a venomous, hateful look. Arthur is just a bitter, lonely loser who is mad at the world. If you say one more disrespectful word to her, Arthur, I swear to God I will break your jaw right here in the kitchen. I did not engage with his childish threats. I did not raise my voice. I simply poured my black coffee in total silence, my face a mask of stone. Let them perform their little theater act. Let them build their comfortable lies. I had serious work to do, and I was not going to waste my energy screaming at brick walls. I left the house without eating and drove my rental car to a local diner on the rundown edge of town. It was a depressing place with cracked red vinyl booths, flickering neon lights, and the heavy smell of stale grease. I had arranged a very important meeting. Waiting in the back corner booth was a woman named Sarah. I had found her contact info deep in one of the scam survivor forums the night before. She looked incredibly exhausted, her eyes carrying a profound, heavy sadness that aged her beyond her years. I walked over, sat down across from her, and ordered us 2 black coffees from the waitress. Sarah, I am Arthur. Thank you so much for agreeing to meet me on such short notice. She clutched her thick ceramic mug with trembling hands, looking around nervously. You said on the phone that you know Elena. She is calling herself Serena now? Yes, I confirmed quietly. She is marrying my younger brother in exactly 3 days. My parents just gave her their entire life savings, their home equity, and their retirement funds. Sarah let out a bitter, jagged breath that sounded almost like a sob. That is exactly her pattern. That is exactly what she does. 2 years ago, she was engaged to my younger brother. She called herself Chloe back then. She was so charming. She convinced my elderly parents to invest heavily in a surefire commercial real estate flip she was supposedly managing. She took $80,000 directly from my parents' retirement fund, and she took $20,000 from my own savings account. 3 days before the wedding ceremony, she completely vanished. She cleared out all the joint bank accounts, blocked all of our phone numbers, and disappeared into thin air. We tried to pursue a massive civil lawsuit against her, but she had brilliantly set it up as a voluntary gift in the legal paperwork she had them sign. We had absolutely no legal recourse. She completely destroyed my family, Arthur. My parents got a divorce over the financial stress, and they haven't spoken to each other or me in a year. The wedding felt like a funeral. I listened intently, feeling a cold, hard knot of pure anger form deep in my stomach. This was not just basic greed. This was absolute predatory psychological warfare. She intentionally targeted vulnerable, arrogant people, aggressively fed their massive egos, drained their bank accounts dry, and left them burning in the ashes of their own ruined lives. "Do you have the police reports?" I asked gently, leaning forward. "The bank statements? The failed lawsuit documents?" Sarah reached slowly into her worn canvas tote bag and slid a thick, heavy manila folder across the sticky table. "I have everything. Every single lie, every bank transaction, every fake email. But Arthur, you need to understand something. Your family will not listen to you. People like your parents, people with that much pride, they desperately want to be fooled. It is so much easier for them to attack you than admitting they were wrong and got conned." "I know," I said softly, putting my hand firmly on the heavy folder. It felt incredibly heavy, loaded with explosive ammunition that was about to detonate my entire family structure. "But I am not trying to save their pride anymore. I am just trying to stop a predator from ruining more lives." I thanked Sarah, paid for the coffees, and drove back to the house. The official rehearsal dinner was scheduled for that evening in our backyard. The luxury catering company had finally been paid, no doubt using the freshly deposited second mortgage cash my parents had foolishly handed over to Serena that morning. When I arrived as the sun was setting, the backyard was completely transformed. Expensive fairy lights hung from the trees, custom linens draped over the tables, and soft jazz music played from hidden surround sound speakers. My father was holding court near the patio, holding a glass of scotch and bragging loudly to the neighbors about his brilliant new daughter-in-law's massive crypto portfolio. Julian and Serena were laughing brightly, holding crystal champagne flutes and posing for photos. Lucas was hovering near them like an eager, pathetic puppy waiting for scraps. I stood silently in the dark shadows of the patio edge, holding the thick manila folder tightly against my side. The long, painful era of being the quiet, invisible, abused son was officially over. I watched them toast to their fake wealth and their fake, fragile happiness. They had aggressively stripped me of my dignity for 20 years. They had threatened my education and my future. They had mocked my very existence. I gripped the folder until my knuckles turned stark white. I stepped out of the comforting shadows and walked directly toward the center of the brightly lit patio, right into the middle of their perfect celebration. I foolishly thought the worst part of this journey was over. I thought presenting the concrete evidence would finally end the nightmare and open their eyes. I was so incredibly, dangerously wrong. The evening air was thick, heavy, and completely suffocating, though that might have just been the atmosphere of my childhood home closing in on my throat. I stood silently in the deep, unlit shadows at the far edge of the backyard patio. The rough bark of the massive oak tree pressed against my shoulder blade. In my hands, I tightly gripped the thick manila folder. The heavy cardstock felt like a loaded weapon. My knuckles were stark white under the dim ambient light. I watched the scene unfolding in front of me with the detached, cold calculation of a man evaluating a deeply flawed system. It felt exactly like a stage set for a terrible, incredibly expensive, and deeply tragic suburban play. The fairy lights my mother had insisted on stringing across the massive oak branches cast a soft, golden, deceptively warm glow over the rented luxury linen tablecloths. A professional jazz trio, hired specifically at an exorbitant hourly rate to impress our nosy, deeply judgmental neighbors, played softly in the far corner of the manicured lawn. The luxury catering staff, dressed in crisp white shirts and black vests, moved silently and smoothly among the oblivious guests, handing out crystal flutes of expensive champagne and delicate hors d'oeuvres. It was the absolute perfect picture of American suburban wealth, stability, and generational success. It was also a complete, devastating, and entirely fabricated lie. I watched my father hold court near the expensive outdoor wet bar. He had a heavy glass of top-shelf scotch resting comfortably in one hand, his face flushed with a mixture of alcohol and arrogant, unchecked pride. He was speaking incredibly loudly, clearly making sure his voice carried over the soft jazz music. He had cornered Mr. Henderson, the notoriously strict president of the local HOA, and was currently bragging endlessly about Serena's completely fictional decentralized blockchain investment fund. My father threw around complex financial buzzwords. He clearly did not understand liquidity pools, smart contracts, decentralized autonomous organizations, acting as though he had single-handedly secured our family's financial dynasty for the next 5 generations. He was literally bragging about the massive inheritance he was going to leave behind, an inheritance that was currently being drained into an untraceable offshore account. Over by the newly installed, expensive gas fire pit, Julian and Serena were standing together, laughing brightly at a joke someone had just made. Serena was wearing a stunning, clearly designer silk dress that clung to her frame, leaning softly into Julian's shoulder. She was playing the demanding role of the adoring, incredibly wealthy, and successful fiancé absolutely flawlessly. And hovering right behind them, lingering just out of the main circle of conversation like a desperate, starving stray dog waiting for discarded table scraps, was my older cousin Lucas. He was nodding enthusiastically at everything Serena said, clearly dreaming of the fake crypto tokens she had promised him in exchange for his complete loyalty and his $10,000. They were all so incredibly, sickeningly smug. They had spent 20 long, painful years pushing me down into the dirt, making me feel incredibly small, and aggressively starving me of any basic parental affection or respect, all to build up this absolute illusion of the perfect family. And now, they had literally mortgaged their future, jeopardized their very survival, and handed their entire life savings over to a woman who did not even exist on a single legal paper in the United States. I took a slow, deep breath, letting the cool, humid night air completely fill my lungs. The long, agonizing era of being the quiet, invisible, emotionally abused son was officially over. I stepped out of the comforting darkness of the shadows and walked directly, purposefully toward the brightly lit center of the patio. The heavy crunch of my expensive leather dress shoes on the stone pavers immediately caught my father's sharp attention. He stopped talking mid-sentence. The arrogant, proud smile vanished instantly from his flushed face the second he saw me approaching the group. He quickly excused himself from a deeply confused Mr. Henderson, set his scotch glass down on the outdoor bar with a loud clink, and marched aggressively toward me. His eyes were narrowed into thin slits of pure, unadulterated contempt. "What exactly do you think you are doing out here, Arthur?" My father hissed viciously under his breath, stepping into my personal space and grabbing my upper arm with a painful, bruising grip. "I specifically told you to stay inside the house out of sight. You are completely ruining the high-class aesthetic of the evening. Look at you. You look like a depressed, broke funeral director. Go back to your childhood room immediately before you embarrass your brother in front of the country club board members." I did not flinch. I did not shrink back. I calmly reached down with my free hand and slowly, deliberately peeled his thick fingers off my suit jacket, one by one. I did not break eye contact for a single microsecond. "We need to have a conversation, Dad. All of us. Right now. Inside the house," I said, my voice completely flat and devoid of any warmth. "I am absolutely not doing this with you tonight, Arthur," he growled. his face turning a dangerous shade of crimson. "This is Julian's special night. Do not make a ridiculous scene in front of my friends." "I am not the one making a scene," I replied, my voice steady, cold, and entirely empty of the fear he was so used to seeing in my eyes. "But I promise you, if you do not bring Julian, Serena, and my mother into the living room right this exact second, I will step up onto that very expensive catering table, grab a microphone from the jazz band, and read the contents of this legal folder to every single person in this backyard. It is entirely your choice. Make it." My father looked down at the thick manila folder in my hand. He looked at the stark white knuckles of my grip. Then he looked deeply into my face. He must have seen something completely unfamiliar, something deeply terrifying and unyielding in my eyes, because he actually took a physical step backward. His jaw clenched so hard I thought his teeth might shatter. Without speaking another word, he turned sharply and signaled aggressively to my mother across the yard, motioning toward the back door. Within 3 highly tense minutes, the 5 of us, including Lucas, who had nervously followed Julian and Serena like a shadow, were standing in the dimly lit, suffocatingly quiet living room, far away from the prying eyes of the party guests. "What is the absolute meaning of this disruption?" my mother demanded the second the glass sliding door clicked shut. She was aggressively smoothing down the front of her expensive cocktail dress, her chest heaving with manufactured indignation. "Arthur, you are being incredibly, unbelievably selfish. The Hendersons are out there. The entire country club board is out there. We have a pristine reputation to maintain in this neighborhood." Julian crossed his arms heavily over his chest, standing rigidly and protectively in front of Serena. "Say whatever stupid, jealous thing you have to say and get the hell out of our sight, Arthur. We have a luxury wedding to celebrate and you are ruining the vibe." I did not raise my voice. I did not match their chaotic, aggressive energy. I simply walked slowly over to the heavy glass coffee table in the center of the room and dropped the manila folder directly onto it. The loud, sharp smack of the heavy paper hitting the glass echoed violently in the quiet room. "That woman's name is not Serena," I said smoothly, pointing a single, steady finger directly at the woman hiding behind my brother. The living room went dead, terrifyingly silent. Serena's perfectly manicured hands twitched. Her eyes widened slightly in genuine shock, but she immediately recovered her composure, pressing her hand dramatically and delicately against her chest as if I had just physically struck her. "Arthur, what on earth are you talking about? Are you okay? Have you been drinking?" Serena asked, her voice trembling with perfectly executed, completely fake concern. "Her real legal name is Elena Vance," I continued, ignoring her theatrical performance entirely and locking my eyes directly on my father. "She does not run a decentralized blockchain investment fund. She does not own a single piece of commercial real estate. She does not own a 5-bedroom estate in the suburbs. The white Porsche Macan currently parked in your driveway is a short-term luxury rental secured under a completely fake corporate LLC, and it is currently flagged in the national database for massive non-payment. That is a complete, psychopathic lie," Julian shouted at the top of his lungs, taking an aggressive step toward me, his fists clenched tight at his sides. "You are just so incredibly jealous. You are a pathetic, broke, miserable loser making up complete garbage because you cannot stand the absolute fact that I am highly successful and marrying the woman of my dreams." I calmly reached forward, opened the heavy folder, and deliberately spread the stark, undeniable documents across the glass coffee table like a dealer laying out a winning hand of cards. "Look at the actual legal papers, Julian," I commanded, my voice slicing through his tantrum. "Look at the verified police reports. Look at the sworn affidavits. Exactly 2 years ago, she called herself Chloe. She engaged a wealthy man in Ohio, completely convinced his elderly parents to invest $80,000 from their secure retirement fund into a completely fake commercial real estate flip, and then she completely vanished into thin air exactly 3 days before the wedding ceremony. I sat down and drank coffee with the victim's sister this morning. I have the certified bank statements, the blocked phone records, and the failed civil lawsuit documents right here in front of you. The money you happily gave her this morning from the second mortgage? The cash you drained from the college fund? It is already gone, washed through a crypto tumbler and deposited into an untraceable offshore account. My father stared down at the terrifying pile of papers scattered across the glass table. For a single, fleeting, terrifying second, I saw absolute, unadulterated panic flash violently across his dark eyes. The brutal truth was staring him right in the face. The dates matched perfectly. The timeline matched. The attached photographs matched. The financial routing numbers matched the exact accounts he had wired his life savings to. But then, Serena initiated her backup protocol. She started to cry. It was a masterful, deeply manipulative, Oscar-worthy performance. She let out a choked, desperate sob, her knees buckling slightly as she buried her face deep into Julian's broad shoulder. "Julian, please, make him stop," she wailed, her voice cracking with manufactured devastation. "He is trying to ruin us. Your cousin Lucas warned me about this exact thing last night. He told me Arthur was dangerously, violently obsessed with me and was actively trying to frame me because he was in love with me." I slowly turned my head and locked eyes with Lucas. He shrank back violently against the living room wall, his face completely pale, absolutely unable to meet my steady gaze. "You warned her?" I said coldly, the disgust thick in my voice. "You actively sold out your own blood family. You let your aunt and uncle walk straight into a financial slaughterhouse for a pathetic promise of fake crypto tokens." "I was just trying to keep the family peace," Lucas stammered defensively, holding his hands up. "You were acting completely crazy, Arthur. You were digging into things that were none of your business." My mother gasped dramatically, clutching her pearl necklace and grabbing my father's arm for support. "Richard, do you hear this absolute insanity? Arthur is completely delusional. He maliciously manufactured all these fake legal documents just to destroy his brother's special day. It is pure, unadulterated, psychotic jealousy. He has completely lost his mind." "I did not manufacture a single piece of paper on this table," I stated firmly, tapping the official police report with my index finger. "Call the local precinct listed right here at the top. Ask to speak directly with Detective Miller. Give him this exact case number. It will take you exactly 2 minutes to verify every single word I just said." But they did not reach for their expensive smartphones. They did not even look closely at the papers on the table. My father's face rapidly morphed from a brief moment of panic back into pure, blinding, arrogant rage. He simply could not accept the absolute fact that he had been conned by a pretty face. He could not accept that his golden child, the son he worshipped, was a gullible, arrogant fool. It was vastly, incredibly easier to mentally destroy the scapegoat son than to confront the terrifying monster standing in the room. "You are completely sick in the head," my father said, his voice shaking violently with furious, uncontrolled anger. He stepped forward aggressively and shoved me hard in the center of my chest with both hands. "You are a blood-sucking parasite, Arthur. You have been a massive, heavy disappointment since the very day you were born into this family. You sat in your little community college classes for 10 miserable years, living off my hard-earned money and my endless charity. And this is exactly how you repay us? By trying to frame this beautiful, successful, wealthy woman just because you are a miserable failure of a man. Dad, I am literally trying to save you from complete financial bankruptcy and absolute ruin," I said, holding my ground, refusing to be physically intimidated. "I am cutting you off forever," my father roared, spit flying from his trembling lips. "I am calling the bank first thing tomorrow morning. Your tuition money is gone. Your rent money is gone. You are completely legally cut out of my will. You will never see a single dime of my inheritance. I want you to pack your cheap, pathetic bags, get out of my house tonight, and I never want to see your face at another Thanksgiving, funeral, or holiday ever again." Julian sneered at me with pure hatred, wrapping his arm tightly and protectively around Serena's waist. "You heard him, you broke loser. Get the hell out of our house before I call the cops and have you arrested for trespassing. I looked closely at their faces. Defensive, highly dismissive, completely and utterly deluded. They did not want the brutal truth. They desperately wanted the comfortable, expensive, shiny fiction that made Julian a successful prince and Serena a wealthy queen. They wanted to stay asleep in their comfortable beds while their house burned to the ground around them. And right then, in that exact, crystal-clear moment, something deep inside my chest completely snapped. The last remaining, frayed thread of familial obligation, the last tiny shred of hope I had for this toxic family, dissolved into absolute nothingness. I realized there was no saving people who were aggressively fighting to drown. They had to burn. The suffocating silence in the living room was incredibly heavy, broken only by Serena's fake, calculated, rhythmic sniffles and the distant, muffled sound of the jazz band continuing to play cheerful music in the backyard. My father stood incredibly tall, his chest puffed out aggressively, waiting expectantly for me to completely break down. He was desperately waiting for me to cry, to apologize profusely, to beg on my hands and knees for my pathetic community college tuition and my monthly rent stipend not to be cut off. He wanted me to fall to the floor and submit entirely to his absolute authority, just like I had done when I was a terrified, helpless teenager living under his tyrannical roof. Instead of crying, I started to laugh. It was not a hysterical, unhinged laugh. It was a deep, resonant, genuinely and profoundly amused laugh that echoed loudly off the high, vaulted ceiling of the living room. I threw my head back and laughed openly at the absolute, staggering absurdity of the entire situation. I laughed at their arrogance. I laughed at their blind stupidity. My mother recoiled violently, pulling back as if I had physically struck her across the face. What on earth is so funny, you psycho? Have you completely lost your mind? I slowly stopped laughing. I let my face drop into a terrifying mask of pure, cold, unyielding stone. I maintained unbroken eye contact with my father as I slowly reached into the inside breast pocket of my custom-tailored suit jacket. My father flinched slightly, perhaps thinking I was reaching for a weapon, but I simply pulled out my sleek, minimalist black leather wallet. "You are going to cut off my tuition?" I asked quietly, my voice completely devoid of any warmth, carrying a sharp, dangerous edge. "You are going to cut off the pathetic $300 a month you send me? The tiny scrap of money you hold over my head every single day like a loaded gun." I deliberately pulled out a thick stack of heavy, premium, gold-embossed business cards and tossed them casually onto the glass coffee table, right next to the scattered police reports. "Pick one of them up, Dad. Pick it up and read it out loud to the room." My father glared at me with pure hatred, stubbornly refusing to move an inch. Julian, however, driven by his own arrogant, insatiable curiosity, snatched one of the heavy cards off the glass table. He looked down at it, his brow furrowing deeply in profound confusion as his brain struggled to process the words printed in expensive ink. "Arthur Reynolds." Julian read slowly, his voice losing some of its aggressive edge. "Director of Product Analytics, Tech Fusion Global." Julian looked up, scoffing loudly, though his eyes darted nervously. "Did you print these fake cards at a local public library, you absolute freak? What exactly is this supposed to prove to us?" I completely ignored him. I reached into my pocket again and pulled out my personal cell phone. I quickly bypassed my biometric lock screen, opened my highly secure, encrypted banking application, and seamlessly mirrored my phone screen directly to the massive, 70-inch smart TV mounted on the living room wall behind them. The large screen flashed a bright blue, and then, in massive, undeniable, high-definition white numbers, my primary checking account balance appeared for the entire room to see. It was a staggering, heavy six-figure number, and that was just the liquid cash sitting in my daily checking account. It did not include the investment portfolios, the real estate equity, or the corporate stock options. My mother physically stumbled backward, her expensive heels catching on the Persian rug. Her hand flew violently to cover her mouth. "What? Whose account is that? What is that number? That is my liquid cash, I said clearly, my voice ringing with absolute, undeniable authority. I did not forge those premium business cards, Julian. I also did not attend a single day of community college in my entire life. 10 years ago, when you two sat me down at the kitchen table and told me I was absolutely not allowed to accept my full-ride academic scholarship to the University of Chicago because it would hurt Julian's fragile, pathetic little ego, I forged my local enrollment papers. I printed out fake class schedules. I packed my bags in the middle of the night, I moved to Chicago, I took my scholarship, and I graduated summa cum laude in data science at the absolute top of my class. I have been entirely 100% financially self-sufficient since the day I turned 18 years old. The color rapidly and violently drained from my father's face. He stared blankly at the massive numbers glowing on the television screen, his brain desperately, frantically trying to process the catastrophic, instantaneous collapse of his entire arrogant worldview. He opened his mouth, closed it and opened it again. That is completely impossible. You are lying to us. You are a broke student. You have always been a failure. Am I? I challenged, stepping closer to him. I opened my phone contacts, scrolled down, found my CEO's direct personal number, and hit dial. I put the phone on speaker and cranked the volume all the way up so the dialing tone echoed in the silent room. It rang twice before a deep, highly authoritative, commanding voice answered. Arthur, it's late on a weekend. What's going on? Are we having critical issues with the European server migration? No, Marcus. I am incredibly sorry to call you so late on a Saturday, I said smoothly, keeping my eyes locked on my father's pale face. I just desperately needed to quickly confirm my employment status for a complicated family matter. Could you please tell my father exactly what my current position is at your company? There was a brief, highly calculated pause on the line. Marcus, being the ruthless, brilliant corporate shark that he was, instantly sensed the heavy tension in my voice. He did not ask questions, he simply played the game. Certainly, Marcus's voice boomed through the speaker. Mr. Reynolds? Your son is my senior director of product analytics. He personally oversees a highly specialized department of 40 elite engineers and is currently leading a $30 million software deployment for our European division. He is, without a doubt, one of the most brilliant, capable executives I have ever hired in my entire career. Frankly, I pay him a massive six-figure base salary, alongside heavy stock options, just to make absolutely sure our competitors don't steal him away from me. Is there a problem regarding his employment? No problem at all, Marcus. Thank you for your time. I will see you in the office on Monday morning. I ended the call. The sharp beep of the line disconnecting sounded exactly like a gunshot in the perfectly silent living room. I looked slowly at my family. Their faces were an absolute masterpiece of profound shock, deep horror, and crippling, world-shattering embarrassment. The invisible, pathetic, abused son they had treated like absolute garbage for 2 decades was standing right in the middle of their living room, completely untouched by their pathetic financial threats, vastly wealthier, vastly smarter, and vastly more successful than they could ever dream of being in their entire lives. I turned my cold gaze directly to Serena. Her fake, theatrical tears had instantly, magically dried up. Her jaw was slightly slack, her eyes darting rapidly and frantically between the glowing television screen and my face. She realized, with horrifying absolute clarity, that she had just tried to run a basic, low-level financial scam on a man who literally built complex anti-fraud algorithms for international tech corporations. She had targeted the absolute wrong family, and she had just been caught by the apex predator in the room. You! My mother stammered, real tears welling up in her eyes now. But these were heavy tears of profound humiliation, not sadness. You actively lied to us for 10 years? You let us think you were struggling to survive? You let us send you $300 a month? How could you be so incredibly cruel and vindictive? Cruel, I snapped, my voice finally rising, filled with the heavy, dark weight of 20 years of completely suppressed rage and trauma. You systematically ignored my entire existence. You left me sitting on the cold floor waiting for you, while you constantly celebrated Julian's endless mediocrity. You looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't allowed to succeed. I wasn't allowed to be smart, because it would make him sad. You actively tried to sabotage my future to protect his fragile ego. You gave him absolutely everything. You gave him the college fund, the cars, the praise, and you gave me the scraps off the floor. I didn't lie to you to be cruel. I lied to you to survive your abuse. I built my entire empire in the dark, in absolute secrecy, because if I had built it in the light, you would have actively tried to tear it down or forcefully hand it over to him. I walked over to the television and aggressively disconnected my phone, plunging the massive screen back into sudden darkness. I calmly picked up my premium business cards and the thick manila folder, sliding them neatly and precisely back into my leather briefcase. I came here this weekend out of the absolute goodness of my heart to warn you, I said quietly, looking directly at my father. He looked like he had physically aged 15 years in 5 minutes. His broad shoulders were slumped, his arrogant posture completely shattered, his authority entirely vaporized. I actively tried to stop you from losing your family house, your retirement fund, your inheritance, and your basic dignity to a professional, documented con artist. But you are all so desperately, pathologically addicted to the grand illusion of your own perfection that you actively chose to believe a beautiful stranger over your own flesh and blood. I snapped the heavy brass locks of my briefcase shut. The sound was incredibly final. I walked right past Julian, who was staring blankly at the floor, completely speechless, his entire worldview destroyed. I stopped right in front of Serena. She tensed her shoulders, clearly expecting me to yell or strike her. I just leaned in incredibly close to her ear and whispered in a dead, cold tone, "Run while you still can, because I already sent this entire folder, including your new aliases, to the FBI Financial Crimes Division this afternoon." Serena's face went chalk white. She looked like she was going to be physically sick. I walked purposefully to the front door, my posture perfectly straight, my head held incredibly high. I opened the heavy wooden door, letting the cool, refreshing night air wash over my heated face. I looked back at them one last time. They were completely frozen in the living room, a deeply broken, toxic family standing in the absolute ruins of their own making. "When she disappears tomorrow with everything you have," I said, my voice carrying clearly and coldly across the large room, "do not call me. I am officially resigning from this family. I am no longer your son." I walked out the door, got into my rental car, and drove away into the night without ever checking the rearview mirror. Exactly 3 days later, the absolute worst-case scenario became reality. I was safely back in Chicago, sitting comfortably in my favorite local, high-end coffee shop. The bright morning sun was warming my back through the massive glass windows as I calmly reviewed some highly complex data metrics on my laptop. It was a crisp, beautiful Tuesday morning. It was also, ironically, supposed to be the morning of Julian's incredibly lavish, wildly expensive wedding ceremony. My personal cell phone, which I had placed face down on the polished wooden table, began to violently and continuously vibrate. It stopped for exactly 3 seconds, then immediately started buzzing again. It buzzed relentlessly, vibrating loudly across the table surface. I let it ring for 10 minutes. I finally picked it up, unlocked it, and flipped it over to look at the notifications. 42 missed calls, 68 frantic text messages, 7 desperate, lengthy voicemails. I took a slow, highly satisfying sip of my black coffee, feeling an overwhelming, deep sense of calm wash over my entire body. The massive financial storm had finally made landfall, completely destroying the coast. I pressed play on the first voicemail. It was my father. His voice was completely, utterly unrecognizable. It was cracked, deeply broken, and filled with a desperate, guttural, hyperventilating panic that I had never heard in my entire life. "Arthur. Arthur, please, I am begging you. Pick up the phone. She is gone. Serena is gone. Julian woke up early this morning and the hotel bridal suite was completely empty. Her bags are gone. The white Porsche is missing from the valet. I called the bank the second he called me, Arthur, the joint bank accounts are completely empty. The second mortgage cash, the college funds, your mother's entire inheritance money. It is all completely gone. The police are standing in my kitchen right now saying they can't do anything because she had us willingly sign those voluntary gift documents. Arthur, we are completely ruined. We have $0. The luxury catering company is threatening to file a massive lawsuit against us by Friday. Please, son. Please, you have to call me back. We need you. We are so sorry. I stared at the screen, my face completely expressionless, and deleted the voicemail. I opened the text messages. Julian had sent a massive, rambling block of text, completely devoid of his usual blinding arrogance and entitlement. Arthur, I'm so sorry. I am so stupid. You were absolutely right about her. She took absolutely everything. I just checked my credit report and I have $50,000 of high-interest credit card debt in my name that she completely maxed out. I can't pay it. I'm gonna go to jail. Please, please help me. You have the money. Please. Even my treacherous cousin Lucas had texted me. His message reeking of pathetic desperation. Man, I am ruined. She took my 10 grand too. My dad found out what I did to you and he kicked me out of the house. I'm sleeping in my car. I'm so incredibly sorry I sold you out to her. Please, Arthur, you're a literal millionaire. Can you just spot me some cash to get an apartment? I sat there in the quiet, peaceful coffee shop, watching the normal people outside walking their dogs, holding hands and rushing to work. I felt absolutely no dark joy in my family's suffering. But I also felt absolutely zero pity or empathy. They had aggressively, violently dug their own financial graves. They had intentionally ignored every single blaring warning sign, insulted the only person trying to save them, and gladly jumped headfirst into the pit. But I am not a monster. And despite everything they put me through, I am, at my core, an architect of complex systems. I fix broken things. I optimize failures. I just don't fix them for free anymore. And I certainly don't fix them with love. I made a single brief phone call to Oliver, a highly aggressive, deeply terrifying corporate financial lawyer whom I kept on a very expensive retainer for my real estate dealings. 2 days later, Oliver and I walked slowly up the gravel driveway of my childhood home. The massive, expensive wedding tent in the backyard was half dismantled, the white canvas flapping sadly in the wind. The incredibly expensive floral arrangements on the front porch were completely dead, rotting and turning brown in the sun. It looked like a graveyard of broken egos. My mother opened the front door before I even knocked. She looked completely hollowed out, a ghost of the arrogant woman she used to be. She wasn't wearing an ounce of makeup, her hair was a mess, and she looked like she hadn't slept a single hour in a week. She saw me standing on the porch and immediately burst into heavy, hysterical, gasping tears, reaching her arms out desperately to hug me. I took a firm step back, completely avoiding her embrace, keeping my hands at my sides. Let's go to the dining room, I said coldly, my voice leaving no room for argument. My father and Julian were sitting silently at the large dining table, completely surrounded by towering piles of past due bills, empty bank statements, and legal threats from wedding vendors. They looked up slowly when I walked in. My father tried to stand up, instinctively trying to muster some of his old, booming patriarchal authority. But his legs seemed to give out, and he just sank heavily back down into his wooden chair, staring at the floor. Arthur, my father croaked, his voice raw, you came back. Thank God you came back. We need a loan. Just a couple $100,000 to clear the mortgage default and the wedding debt. We will pay you back, I swear it, with interest. You have the money, we saw the account. Please. I didn't sit down. I simply gestured to Oliver, who pulled out a thick, heavy stack of dense legal documents from his leather briefcase and placed them firmly, with a loud thud, on the center of the dining table. I am not giving you a single dime of my money, I stated clearly, enunciating every syllable. The room went so dead silent you could hear a pin drop. I will not transfer any cash into your accounts. I will not give Julian money to pay off his maxed-out credit cards. However, I will instruct my lawyer, Oliver here, to directly contact the bank holding your second mortgage. He will aggressively negotiate a settlement and pay the bank directly from a secure escrow account to keep this house from going into immediate foreclosure. He will also contact the catering vendors and settle the lawsuits directly. The money will never, ever touch your hands. You will not have access to a single penny. My father's face flushed with a brief flash of indignation. You are treating us like irresponsible children. We are your parents. You act like incredibly irresponsible children. I shot back immediately, my voice echoing sharply in the quiet house. But that is not all. My financial assistance comes with extremely strict, non-negotiable legal conditions. I pointed directly to the second thick stack of papers on the table. This is a legally binding admission of fault and a relinquishment of any future claims against my estate. By signing this document, you officially admit, on legal paper, to 20 years of severe emotional abuse, financial neglect, and blatant, destructive favoritism. You admit that you drove me out of this house. You admit that you willingly and arrogantly ignored my explicit warnings about Elena Vance due to your own blinding greed. If you do not sign this document right now, Oliver and I will pack up these papers, we will walk out that front door, and you can explain to the bank why you are living in a cardboard box under a bridge next month. You cannot possibly be serious? My mother sobbed loudly, covering her face with both hands. You want to humiliate us on permanent legal paper? This is blackmail. You happily humiliated me for 2 solid decades, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous, icy whisper. Sign the paper or I leave. You have exactly 60 seconds to decide if your pride is worth your house. Julian was the first to completely break. Crying silently, tears streaming down his face, he desperately grabbed the provided pen and quickly scribbled his signature on the dotted line. My mother followed immediately after, her hand shaking so violently she could barely form the letters of her name. Finally, my father, entirely broken, his spirit crushed, and completely stripped of every single ounce of pride he possessed, slowly picked up the pen and signed his name. Oliver efficiently scooped up the documents, carefully checked the signatures for validity, and nodded professionally at me. The toxic power dynamic in that room, and in this entire family, was permanently, irreversibly destroyed. I was no longer the helpless scapegoat. I was the absolute authority, the one holding the keys to their very survival, and I was locking the door behind me. Exactly 1 year later, I stepped out onto the expansive back patio of my brand new home. It was a beautiful, sprawling, historic craftsman bungalow located in a quiet, heavily wooded, highly exclusive suburb of Chicago. The morning air was incredibly crisp, carrying the deep, earthy scent of damp soil and fresh pine needles. I walked slowly down the stone steps into my massive, meticulously landscaped backyard garden. I spent almost all of my weekends out here now, kneeling in the rich dirt, growing heirloom tomatoes, bright bell peppers, and massive, towering sunflowers. There is something incredibly profound and deeply healing about taking a tiny, fragile seed, planting it in good soil, aggressively nurturing it, and watching it grow strong and tall. It was the exact, absolute opposite of what my toxic family had done to me for 20 years. I took out my phone and quickly checked my email. There was a short message from Dr. Evelyn, my dedicated trauma therapist. I had been seeing her religiously twice a week for the past 12 months. Her email was brief, just a standard professional confirmation for our session tomorrow afternoon. But simply reading her name on the screen brought a profound, deep sense of peace to my chest. She had helped me navigate the intense, crushing guilt that often tragically follows cutting off abusive family members. She had patiently helped me realize that setting titanium-level boundaries was not an act of cruelty. It was an act of extreme, necessary self-preservation. My phone buzzed again in my hand. It was a long text message from Uncle Thomas. He was the only person from my hometown, the only blood relative, that I still maintained any form of contact with. Hey kid, just giving you the monthly update from the war zone. Your dad is officially working the customer service return desk at the local hardware store to help pay off the remaining crushing debts. Your mom completely stepped down from the HOA board and quit the country club because she couldn't handle the aggressive gossip from the neighbors. Julian is currently working as a minimum wage cashier at a local grocery store. He looks absolutely miserable. Oh, and by the way, I saw the news online. The FBI finally caught Elena Vance hiding out in a cheap motel in Florida. She was actively trying to run the exact same crypto scam on a retired dentist. The feds are throwing the book at her. She's looking at a minimum of 20 years in federal prison for wire fraud. I stood perfectly still and read the long text message twice. A year ago, reading that message might have given me a dark, twisted sense of vindictive joy. I might have felt a rush of adrenaline at their complete downfall. But today, standing quietly in my beautiful garden, listening to the birds, I felt absolutely nothing. No joy, no lingering anger, no residual sadness. Just complete, absolute, peaceful indifference. They were essentially strangers to me now. The heavy, suffocating iron chains of my past trauma had finally completely rusted through and broken off. I didn't even bother replying to the text. I just put the phone back in my pocket, picked up my watering can, and went back to tending my tomatoes. That evening, I drove my car downtown to a massive, brightly lit community center in the heart of the city. I walked confidently into the main auditorium, which was packed to the brim with over 200 people. The entire room erupted into loud, genuine, thunderous applause as I walked down the center aisle. When I fully realized exactly how much money I was making at my company, and how incredibly little I actually needed to live a peaceful, fulfilling life, I made a major decision. I decided to build something truly meaningful. I officially founded the Invisible Children Scholarship Fund. It was a massive, multi-million-dollar financial program specifically designed for high-achieving, brilliant, driven students who came from highly toxic, deeply neglectful, or financially abusive homes. Kids who had the raw brains, the talent, and the unstoppable drive, but had absolutely no family support system to back them up. Kids who were constantly told they weren't good enough, just like I was. I walked up the steps to the wooden podium, adjusted the microphone, and looked out into the massive crowd. I saw Marcus, my CEO, sitting right in the front row, smiling proudly and clapping his hands. I saw Dr. Evelyn sitting a few rows back, nodding encouragingly. I saw Uncle Thomas, who had flown in specifically just for this event, wiping a tear from his eye. But mostly, my eyes were drawn to the faces of the 50 young students sitting in the designated front section. They looked incredibly nervous, vibrating with excitement, and absolutely full of raw, untapped potential. "Welcome, everyone," I said, my voice echoing clearly and strongly through the large room, carrying absolutely no hesitation. 10 years ago, I was sitting alone in the dark, illegally forging college enrollment documents just to get a basic education, because my own parents looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't allowed to succeed. I was told, repeatedly, that my only role in life was to be invisible. But I am looking out at all of you today, and I want to tell you something very important, something you might have never heard at home. You are seen. Your incredibly hard work is seen. Your silent struggles are seen. And your future is entirely, 100% yours to build, no matter who tries to drag you down or stand in your way. The crowd erupted into deafening cheers. As I spent the next hour personally handing out massive, life-changing scholarship checks, firmly shaking the hands of kids who were openly crying with intense relief, I finally felt the last remaining, jagged pieces of my broken childhood heal and seal shut. I had finally stopped trying to squeeze love out of a cold stone. I had actively chosen to build my own family, build my own supportive community, and build my own lasting legacy. Some bridges in life simply cannot be rebuilt. Some bridges are so thoroughly rotten, so fundamentally toxic and dangerous to your mental health, that the only logical, healthy thing to do is to light a match, burn them completely to the ground, and walk away peacefully by the bright light of the flames. Let's pause for a moment. Thank you so much for staying with me this far. You are truly amazing and I appreciate your time. Blood does not always make a true family, and you are never, ever obligated to set yourself on fire just to keep toxic, abusive people warm. Have you ever faced something incredibly similar with your own family? Have you ever had to draw a hard line in the sand and walk away to save your own life? Share your story in the comments below, and please do not forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next journey. Stay strong, protect your peace, and keep building your own empire.